Luka, this is a little bit different.
Mm.
We're not in the same physical
In what way?
Well, we're not in the same physical location. You're in your house and I'm in mine. Having that said, we actually could be in the same location. It's not that we're not allowed to be. It's just that I think as a little bit has happened since the last show that we put up, where it was sort of the start of this whole crazy time that we're sort of going through. And I think the main reason why there haven't been shows isn't because we haven't wanted to. It's just I've been very, very busy, and to be honest, my backside has not moved from this chair for months.
Yeah. Now but at least now there's plenty to talk about as well. So we have lots to catch up on. There's been a lot of activity in the moth community post lockdowns in a lot of countries, and a lot of new products, a lot of new developments. So I think we can get into it, Bruce.
We definitely can. It's interesting how you said post-lockdown, because I think some of us are actually starting to go down into the second round, which is all a bit bizarre. So,
yeah,
but I don't want to talk about that. Other than we will talk about what effect it's happened, what effect it has had, not happened. I can English good. What effect it has had on the events, the moth events that have been going around. So, but before we get into anything, things have changed, Luka. You've lost someone.
I have lost something. Yeah, look, the boat's gone after 10 years, so that's been pretty awesome little development bet for me for new products, and just trying to see if I could keep this old boat competitive and almost prove that the platform is not all that important as long as it's light and strong, and even the weight's not that big an issue anymore. But the boat's gone. It sold within 30 minutes of being advertised, so I was very happy with that.
So the boat doesn't matter. Does it really not matter? So there was a video I did, which people won't have seen, which is a bit of a joke video for you, where I essentially went through my. It was meant to be a joke, and it was meant to be the funeral video.
It almost made me cry.
Well, it did. It made me cry as well. So it was like the little funeral video. And what I might do, I might put a snippet at the end of the show for those that actually hang around. But it was like a little funeral video of from all the photos in my photo library. And I think what's interesting is there's a lot of history with that boat, and I think we'd forgotten exactly how many hours and how many different configurations that you'd actually done on that thing.
Yeah, the build itself was about 600 hours of my time plus Marty's time, and
good thing we don't count our hours.
There would have been almost as many hours in modifications.
So yeah, it's interesting where it started and where it ended up, and I think the really I'm going to say interesting again how many times. The really interesting, I think, is most boats don't go through that life cycle of development. A lot of people, they'll buy a boat. In fact, even with, I think some of the trends we've seen with some of the Beakers, and some of definitely the Mark IIs, and even to Exocets, where it's this, I'll buy another boat, I'll buy another version of that same boat a few seasons later as upgrades come online. So a lot of boats, they don't actually get held by an owner and improved over the years. So it was really interesting to see that, yes, it absolutely can be done, and you can actually get a lot of longevity out of these platforms.
Yeah, and we've been through the journey together. You've modified your boat as well, Bruce. And for me, it was always the key. You keep the same platform and you try to improve it because there's so much time and effort that's gone into building it. I always felt that it's very difficult for a commercial product to be as good as a carefully built one-off, purely because who's going to spend 600 hours on something that they need to charge?
Crazy people.
40,000 Australian dollars for 50 or whatever it costs. So. You can't make your money at 600 hours per boat. I think most boat builders are spending around about 300 hours, 250, something like that, to produce a boat. So, for me, I always felt that whatever I would buy would be a bit of a step down in terms of build quality and weight. But I think the game's changed a little bit now. I think that the Moth class is moving a little bit closer to the low aero drag platforms like the Beaker. I know that there's been experiments with Maguire boats as well, and I kind of see that as the new thing. And I always sort of thought, well, once the platform kind of moves away from the traditional looking Moth, maybe that'll be a good time to change. But it wasn't because the boat was slow. It's purely because I at some stage you've got to upgrade. And also gives you an opportunity to develop products for the Beaker, because I will have a Beaker.
So the Beaker, that was going to be my next question. What did you get? Well, I know, but so a Beaker. You went with a Beaker in the end.
I went with the Beaker. I think the guys have done a great job improving the platform. I think that the design is pretty sound, and they're ironing out quality issues, which is probably the biggest concern at the moment. But they're doing a good job, and I felt that it was really the only option for me because the Maguire list was 2 years, maybe even longer now. So I'm not quite sure. Maybe I stand corrected in that. But yeah, it wasn't really an option to wait that long. And what else do you get that's on par with the best boats at the moment in terms of speed? I felt that the Beaker's probably proven in Perth that with the fast foils, it can be very fast.
So yeah, it's also we get the advantage of Aussie dollar versus New Zealand dollar. It's not that far to have it shipped across the ocean from New Zealand to Australia, as opposed to from, for example, the UK or Italy or somewhere in Europe over to Australia. It also just shows, I think, that the need for an Aussie-based manufacturer, because I think we sort of don't think of Mark II as Aussie, even though it actually is, because the boats actually come out of China, so you sort of pay to bring them in. There isn't that Aussie manufacturer where you don't have to pay. I think we have to pay some form of import shipping freight thing, no matter what you get, unless you buy something here in Australia. So the Beaker. So one other thing which I've sort of been a bit impressed with, and I've only primarily because we've sort of seen what's been happening with yours as the sort of spec, is the rate at which they're actually developing the platform. Because I think Keegan York, his Beaker arrived 2 weeks ago. A week and a half ago, I think.
Yeah,
as we record this.
Yeah,
already obsolete though, isn't it? Sorry, Keegan.
Well,
First time to find out.
Different. Not very much different. Look, they're tweaks. They're not big changes. And I think that will slow down once they work out the best manufacturing methods, the quickest way to do things. And they have improved, control take-ups and that sort of thing. So, it's subtle changes. I wouldn't say that, it makes the old boats obsolete, but it certainly is moving in the right direction. But yeah, it's exciting. There's going to be a big learning curve, I think, with the small wings. Not that we had very large wings before, Bruce. If you remember, we always ran very, very small tramps. So we almost
still do.
Still do. So yeah. So I don't think it'll be as big a challenge as for some that are used to the lounge chair Mark II type wings.
I think we sort of refer to them as the G-string tramps, which was very much a cutout at either end, basically exposing wing bar. So yeah, the actual tramp area that we had is quite small, having to keep the frontal area down. But I think the thing that we have that the Beakers don't is we still had the bar around. So theoretically, you had somewhere to put your arm if you needed to, and it never really did.
Yeah.
Plus, with mine, there's still the rope across the back from the back bar, so it's essentially it's almost like a little kiddie fence around the back of the wing, should you get into trouble.
And also, the masts were further forward. The Beaker masts have gone back, or the stump has gone back 100 mil back further compared to the Mark II. So you could, you'd almost need 100 mil further on the wing bar to counteract that.
So all I can say, I think, given all of that, you're very lucky that the trend isn't to have deck sweepers where the base is getting longer and the area to get across the boat is getting smaller and smaller.
Well, this is the thing, are the Beaker wings too far forward? That's the $1 million question. I don't think so. I think it's still fine. I'm not sure that there's a huge gain in the long deck sweepers, but I might be proven wrong. We really don't know. There's been a bit of testing. These new deck sweepers are absolutely enormous. They're around about 1200, 1250 millimeter mark, which doesn't leave a great deal of room to get behind it and cross the boat, particularly if the wings are a long way forward. So, will that be the limiting factor? Will we go back to Mark II type wings, or even Hungry Tiger days where the wing bars were all the way back? I wouldn't be surprised, if the wing bars were all the way back, you could have probably 1500 millimeter long deck sweeper.
So can I just posit 2 points? My point of view is quite different to yours, because I'm represent the everyman as opposed to the front of the fleet racer. And for me, someone who literally has very limited amount of time that I can put in practicing, on the water. I think there is no question for me missing one tack, causing one problem on the Beaker. I would be slow around the course. So I think for the not the top 10% or the top 1%, I think for something like given the choice of Exocet
Yeah,
versus a Beaker, I think the Exocet wing package would definitely be the way to go for the everyman. Maybe not outright quicker, but I think in regards to me time around the course, I think there's no question in my
I
mind.
I agree with you. I think the Exocet package is amazing, and as Tom's proven that in Perth. But I think, yeah, absolutely. The Beaker's not for everyone in my mind. I think it's really for the top of the fleet. And when I say top of the fleet, I really mean top 30 in the world. I'm not, if even Beck of Gold fleet, you probably would be better off in a easier to use boat or easier to sail. So we'll see. It's all going to be interesting next time around. But we won't find out in September, that's for sure.
No, so I think I think we should do, Luca. I think when it turns up, let's do an unbox. Let's do a classic internet unboxing video.
Yeah, well, I think we did talk about this. I think let's do that. Let's do the unboxing of the Beaker, and talk through what's different, how that's changed from the Mark II or Exocet platforms, and let's have a look at the finer details of what's been done well and what hasn't, and a fairly honest review of the package. Clearly, I'm a little bit biased because I have bought a Beaker, so my loyalty is a little bit with that package, believing that it is potentially the fastest at the moment.
Especially as the majority of the fleet run your foils, the Beakers that are.
Yeah, they do. So that's definitely going to be interesting. But also we'll look at the Exocet, and we'll look at the Mark II, one of the later Mark IIs. So I think a free boat review, obviously not on the same day, but perhaps over a few episodes.
Yeah.
And as you said, from front of the fleet point of view to
the everyman.
Yeah, because
so
it will be very different.
Yeah, I think that's really a good idea. What we'll do is we'll basically review it from your point of view and from mine, because I think they're actually quite different points of view. So I've been stuck in this chair, doing the work that I do working remotely. What have you been doing, Luca? I assume because your shed is under your house, so you haven't actually been not able to go to work every day.
No, not a lot has changed for me. Life is fairly similar. Still doing some coaching, Moth coaching and Wasp coaching, which is good. But a hell of a lot of product development. So I haven't really had much of a downtime. I found that my orders have been pretty steady throughout this whole period, which has been amazing. Probably kept up by some of the new Beaker boats and foils for those, and also people upgrading and whatnot. So I haven't seen much of a slowdown. But it always is a slowdown compared to the World Championship lead up into the World Championship. So it has been a little bit quieter than in December. So yeah, I've done a hell of a lot of product development. There'll be some new and exciting things coming out. You know all about them, Bruce. But
no.
but yeah, and a lot of testing. I am, as you know, I'm very big on testing, and nothing gets put in production until it's been properly tested, because I believe that's the only way to tell and improve the product, because you can actually build something, test it, see if it works like you designed it to work. You might come up with an idea to make a foil bigger, smaller, whatever it might be, and that evolution through testing is just so powerful.
So, Luca, you just said big, small. What are you doing? Are you going bigger? Going smaller?
Look, the range will get bigger, right?
The range will get bigger, not the
range
foils.
will get bigger. But yeah, look, bit of everything. It's all about trying to improve every aspect of the foil design. The Swift Large and the Swift Small work really well, so there's going to be no changes to those, but not for the foreseeable future. But I feel that there could be some other products in there that can complement the range, so that's what I'm working on now. I'm also working on some vertical modifications. The new Swift high modulus verticals are getting a bit of an update. And again, I can't go into too much detail on that, but it's also in testing. And but the big one that I can go into detail is the new Swift Rudder vertical, which will really complete the range now, so that there is a full set of foils that you can buy from Demic Design. So the new Rudder vertical is pretty exciting product, and I think it will be a bit of a game changer for the Mark IIs.
Because this is that's the only really part of the foil package, so to speak, that you haven't actually had in stock, right? So it's the one part where you were reliant on either getting an Exocet vertical and modifying it, or getting a Mark II, or running a Mark II vertical, or whatever vertical you could get. That's the one part that
Yeah,
you didn't have to complete the foil range, if you like.
that's where it all started. Tom Burton bought an Exocet vertical for Perth Worlds, and it got lengthened, and we sort of discussed about what length, how much longer do we want to go. And the interesting thing is that the Exocet and the Mark II verticals are the 2.3s and the 2.4 verticals, rudder verticals, are exactly the same length. Although even though the main foil verticals are vastly different, the Exocet verticals are about 80 mil shorter than the 2.4 variant of the Mark II. So that kind of leaves you wondering, like, wouldn't they be relative to each other? If the Exocet main foils are 80 mil longer, shouldn't the rudder be 80 mil longer?
So I just want to pause there for a second. So when we talk about the Mark II variants and the 2.4 and the 2.3 and all those versions, what we're talking about is over the history that the Mark II has been around, there have been incremental upgrades to the package. And so the 2.4 is the first, so Mark II being the boat, and the point 4 is the fourth version, or the fourth
Yeah.
rudder design evolution for the Mark II. So
Yeah. So when the 2.3 change came over the 2.0 change on the main verticals, there was an increase of 30 millimeters in rudder length. Then when the 2.4 main verticals came, there was another, I think, 30 or 40 millimeter increase. So, but there was no increase in rudder length from the 2.3 to the 2.4 variant. So what that ultimately meant is that you now had a longer main vertical if you're on a 2.4, and if you're on a 2.4 rudder, you didn't have a long rudder to suit. So that was one problem. And second issue is also the cord, because the cords have gone so small, there wasn't physically enough area in the water to stop rudder washing out. And there'll be hundreds of mothies out there that know what I'm talking about. As you can see in this image here, it's basically what happens when the boat gets loaded. If you pull the main falling into windward, it'll load the rudder vertical up and it'll just wash out. That's one of the examples.
yep,
So
we've all been there.
we've all been there.
And we'll be there again.
And so what you end up doing is flying to the limit of the rudder vertical length, which means you're carrying more centerboard vertical through the water, which is hard drag. So by going longer, all we're doing is basically getting the optimum amount of immersion from both verticals, which is already the case with the Exocet and the Beakers. So it's nothing new. It's just basically making the Mark II package as competitive as the Exocet, for example, because of the rudder vertical length.
Yeah. I think the other parameter that, as home builders, well, I've been able to tweak, you aren't able to tweak it anymore, is the gantry design of the rudder relative to the boat. So I know with my current boat, because I knew that I was going to be running your old verticals, I basically dropped the gantry lower compared to, for example, a Mark II, which is quite high, to get myself to cheat some extra length on my rudder, because I knew I didn't have a longer rudder, for example.
100%. And if you look at this photo here, you can see that my boat's the same. The gantry is almost it is actually at the waterline, which gave me the extra 70, 80 millimeters of rudder vertical length, and that's how I combated this issue on my old boat. But now, this was the whole idea behind this development of the new rudder, is that it solves the problem. It's a bolt-on upgrade. It's longer. It's thinner, it's shorter in cord, it's kind of got all the good stuff that the main vertical already has. It's Harmodose carbon, and yeah, that's that. It's really it really has been driven by the development that Tom did at the Worlds, because we all know how fast he was, and as soon as he put that long rudder on, it was like, wow, this is just awesome. And it's probably one of the bigger changes we've experienced. I think in terms of upgrades, this will make a bigger change than changing the main vertical, for example.
Interesting. So I think so. Is that all? Is that all that's coming out of Dynamic Designs? There's nothing.
There's
nothing
always
else.
more. There's always. I'm always looking for improvements everywhere.
So I won't go into details at all, because it's obviously your trade secrets. But the only thing that I will say is I am continually impressed by the lengths that you're going to be able to build production quality prototypes of things that you're trying without actually having to go and build new tooling and things like that. So there's a few tricks which you're going into, which I'm not going to share because they're obviously your trade secrets.
Yep.
But proving time again that yes, theory and is one thing, but being able to prototype and get things right before you get them in the hands of your customers and expecting them to just take a punt on what you're building is the right thing to do.
Well, that's essentially the problem. If you go the other way and you go and build a mold and you go into production, if there's a problem with the design of any sorts, well, then it's just customers essentially stuck with something that's not ideal. And also, and that's bad for a number of reasons. Not only because of performance, but you're kind of pissing off a lot of people in the process if you're putting stuff out that doesn't work. So for me, that's just not an option. I really want to make sure that the stuff that goes out is not only durable, but it's actually much quicker than its predecessor if there is a new model.
Yeah, but all I do want to say is, as basically as essentially a one-man band, for you to be able to produce production quality prototypes, basically means that everyone else needs to stop with the bullshit and stop expecting customers to pay for their development and just if they can't do it, they've got to try harder.
Yeah, look, the downside is that it costs more money. So this is why they're not doing it, because to go and make a prototype, which is a one-off, is incredibly expensive and time-consuming, depending on how you do it. But regardless of the method, it is going to cost you more money, in terms of making 2 or 3 products that ultimately will not be sold, or they'll go in a bin, or they'll just be used for learning. So it's definitely a more expensive way to develop. That's for sure.
It is, but all I'm really saying from a buyer point of view, you should be asking the question, hey, Mr. Manufacturer, what have you done to test this new foil and make sure that it's going to work for me, as opposed to just buying from a render or buying from a design. Yep. All right. So
speaking of new designs, bro, this is our next topic. There's been a lot of discussion and a lot of online activity about the new boat that seems to have lost an N.
Lost an N? What, the end?
No, the N has gone. So the Thinair no longer has a double N in it. It has a single N, and there's been a bit of a change.
So hang on a minute. So my old joke from a previous show of it's disappeared into thin air. It hasn't disappeared into thin air. It's actually a thing now.
Yeah, it's a thing. It was a thing before too, but
I know, but
but
can't get in the way of a good dad joke. Come on.
Yeah, I know. It's interesting. It's obviously Mike's walked away from the project by the look of things, and we don't know the details, but certainly
I saw on the website he's still listed as a team sailor.
Yeah, and I don't know if he's doing development or not, but he's definitely got a boat. But yeah, interesting. It's they have had problems, manufacturing issues, quality, built, falls breaking and whatnot. That's most people know about that already. But I think
many manufacturers
yeah, it's
before
standard
them.
cycle,
Yep.
But White Formula seems to be doing a good job at marketing it, and the boat seems to be working now. There's some nice videos of it flying around and foil tacking and whatnot. So yeah, interesting. I think the more the merrier, the more builders the better, because we clearly have a problem in the class where you cannot get boats fast enough. When there is a 2-year waiting list on an exocet, then that probably tells us that we need more options.
Not in the United Kingdom and Ireland. If you add them all together, I think there's 5 manufacturers there at the moment, 5 small manufacturers, so they have plenty. But
they're all busy. They're all.
They are.
You can't get a boat from any of them tomorrow. There's a waiting list on all of them, and I think even our friend Phil, he's, I don't know, I think the guy's from 2 years ago getting boats now, so it's not a very different story with his product. Yeah, interesting times.
Yeah, no, it is. So yeah, thin air, made by White Formula. I suppose the only other thing really I wanted just to round out and complete the show is talking about the events and the fact that we're not really an international class at the moment. We've become a national class in many countries, I would say, with the Worlds having to be cancelled or postponed. And I think it's going to happen for a while yet. I don't see any rush. I don't think we're going to be able to rush, even if we wanted to, back to international sort of moth events.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, isn't it? But definitely the right call. I know there was a fair bit of to and from, before the decision was made. But certainly, like we can't even leave the country. So you can't really have a world championship where certain nations can't even attend. So it was
It's
the right call. It definitely wouldn't have been a proper world championship without the Aussies, who really, is
well, the defending champ wouldn't be able to turn up and defend his title.
yeah. But if you look at the top 10 in Perth, and you take out all the Australians, you'd find that there's not many left.
But I think what's particularly interesting about this situation is because of the different approaches that all the countries have taken to the current situation. If you look at us from an Australian point of view, we literally are going to have no international travel, I would say, probably en masse anyway, for the next sort of 12 months. There is obviously limited travel you can do now if you've got reasons and nothing you can leave the country, but to come back in, to actually as an Australian citizen to leave and come back in, it's a minimum of 14 days forced hotel stay at your expense. Plus, the other thing too is because the approach from the countries are all different. We are in Australia. We are going to be heavily, heavily reliant on a vaccine, and until that comes, we are going to basically have to keep our borders pretty much closed.
Yeah,
Because we have not gone, thankfully, we haven't gone through some of those challenges that some of the other countries are going through or have gone through. So yeah, I think that situation is going to be very, very interesting. And I think even with the Australian nationals, which are now planned for Sorrento in Victoria, based on the current situation we're having in that particular state,
yeah,
that may not even go ahead either. So I think there's a lot of turmoil in regards to events at the moment, but all I can say is that just means you should, where it's safe and possible, double down on club racing.
yeah. Look, there's been a little bit of activity in New South Wales with and even Queensland with some of the events organised, like a Grand Prix type, series, and the Perth guys are involved as well in that too. So that might go ahead. We'll see.
I'm going to shake my head and say no.
Well,
No, it might go ahead, but I don't think it'll be well attended. Because it's not just.
no, but the
I
way
don't.
it's working is sorry to interrupt. Is the Perth guys will be able to attend their state championships, and that will count towards the overall series points. So, for example, you'll be able to do local regattas, and that will count towards the overall winner.
So
It's slightly different
this is in case you're wondering, this is a sprint series. They're talking. Some people are trying to get up and running. I'm going to play negative Nancy and say, given the fact that if a lot of people like myself have been forced to take all of their annual leave to ensure that their companies remain healthy financially and stable, and we still actually have jobs to go to,
Yeah.
um, well, I'm not going anywhere in a hurry. And I think a lot of people are going to have those circumstances, even if they could or wanted to travel. I just don't think that a lot of people are going to have the financial means to
Yeah.
do it. So.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, look, I'm hoping that with the cancellation of the UK Worlds, I'm hoping that Garda will be on and that situation improves for mid next year, because that's likely to be an amazing event if we can get it off.
So I think to try and finish this off on a bit of a high note, all I will say is don't wallow in self pity. Use this time to look at your platform, do any upgrades you want to do, and get out there and put those laps in around those two very tightly packed test courses. Learn how to do your starts, learn how to do your tax. Just spend the time, on your little local practice course. Just you can still put the time in. Just because you can't do regattas, you can still, keep the skills sharp and up the game.
Yeah, look, a lot of the guys, a lot of the sailors have excelled without racing and doing events. If you look at the 18-foot skiff guys, Honda Marine from New Zealand, they get very little local racing, and then they came and won the Gilton in Australia this year.
Yep.
Sorry, my dog's just
coming to say hello.
He's yeah, come here, little one.
No, he's run away.
Okay, he just wants to eat my hand.
And on that note, I think we'll call it a show.
Sounds good, Bruce.
All right.
Good to chat.
See you all
later.
next time.